We have a few clips here. First, we have the NDP, but stay tuned for Candace's version. Outstanding job. She's got the T-shirt. It's a really good thing. So stay tuned for more, too. There's a lot going on.
Moments to add to the excellent presentation given by the member for Leeds Grenfell and Rideau Lakes.
Mr. Speaker, in part because it was my motion, an NDP motion that was brought forward to the Finance Committee on July 7th. And I very carefully wrote that motion, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that any redactions necessary be made by the Office of the Law Clerk and Parliamentary Counsel of the House of Commons. The idea was very clear, Mr. Speaker, that redactions that took place would only be taking place by through the Office of the Law Clerk. Mr. Speaker, as you're well aware, all MPs from all parties voted for that motion. So this is not a partisan issue at all. It's an issue of ensuring that the privileges of the House of Commons are maintained, Mr. Speaker. And it was with shock and consternation that the same day that we became aware through the Office of the Law Clerk writing to the Clerk of the Standing Committee on Finance, saying very clearly that departments made certain redactions to documents on grounds that were not contemplated in the order of the committee, and also stating that as my office has not been given the opportunity to see the unredacted documents, we are not able to confirm whether those redactions are consistent with the order of the committee. Of course, the committee would have acted immediately, Mr. Speaker, but as the member points out, at the very same moment that we became aware of the censorship of these documents, 5,000 pages, 1,000 of them that were basically completely or substantially altered and censored, the committee was shut down. Parliament was prorogued, and the committee will not be meeting again, potentially for several weeks. Now, Mr. Speaker, as I know you're aware, and as the member has cited, this work of the Finance Committee comes through an order of the House of Commons. Unanimously, because of the pandemic, we elected at that time, Mr. Speaker, the Finance Committee to provide the oversight for all spending that was related to the pandemic. And surely, in this case, it means that the House of Commons was mandating the Finance Committee to do that work. As you know, Standing Order 108 says that standing committees shall be severally empowered to examine and inquire into all matters as may be referred to them by the House. This is clearly what happened in this case. And as the member has cited in Chapter 20 of the House of Commons Procedure and Practice, we very clearly follow that through the Bible, that is the direction that is provided to us through House of Commons Procedure and Practice. It states that standing orders do not delimit the power to order the production of papers and records. The result is a broad, absolute power that on the surface appears to be without restriction. There is no limit on the types of papers likely to be requested. The only prerequisite is that the papers exist in hard copy or electronic format and that they are located in Canada. They can be papers originating from or in the possession of governments. So clearly we had a House of Commons mandate that was given to the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee was endeavouring to provide that oversight. On July 7th, unanimously, with the support of all members from all parties, there was a request that was made, an order that was made for papers, and on August 18th we find out that they have been censored, substantially redacted, over 1,000 pages that have been basically wholly or substantially blacked out. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'll conclude because I know that there will be other members intervening on this, hopefully today, because it is important that we come, that you be given the opportunity to come to a rapid decision in this respect. I do want to cite again the decision that was made against the Harper government at the time on April 27th, 2010 by Speaker Milliken, who stated the following: "It is a view of the Chair that accepting an unconditional authority of the Executive to censor the information provided to Parliament would in fact jeopardize the separation of powers that is purported to lie at the heart of our parliamentary system and the independence of its constituent parts. Furthermore, it risks diminishing the inherent privileges of the House and its members, which have been earned and must be safeguarded. He also stated that procedural authorities are categorical in repeatedly asserting the powers of the House in ordering the production of documents. No exceptions are made for any category of government documents, even those related to national security. Now, at the time, Mr. Speaker, he was referring to the Special Committee on the Canadian Mission on Afghanistan. So, Mr. Speaker, I would ask, I know that there will be other members intervening, but that you come to a rapid decision on this. In my
opinion, in the opinion of our caucus, there is no doubt that you can find in here a breach of privilege, a prima facie case of breach of privilege, parliamentary privilege at that. And if there is a debate on this issue, our caucus will be fully prepared to take part in that debate. It's an extremely important debate on parliamentary privilege. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Merci. Maintenant,
Thank you.
reprise du débat
Resuming debate.
for Portage-Lisker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I am rising today to speak on behalf of Canada's Conservatives and the official opposition to respond to the government's speech from the throne. Je vais partager.
I will be sharing my time with my colleague, the parliamentary leader for the official opposition, the member for Louis Saint Laurent.
Well, Mr. Speaker, another Liberal speech from the throne, another speech full of recycled Liberal promises with grand gestures and lofty visions, but with no real plan to deal with the pandemic, no real plan to deal with the urgent health care needs of the provinces, no real plan to deal with lack of jobs, no real plan to deal with Canadian unity issues and Western alienation. Mr. Speaker, no plan to deal with the economy. The Liberal speech from the throne is full of the same old promises and recycled ideas that we have all been hearing about for years and years and years. And many of these promises have been unfulfilled, and they leave countless people behind. I'm talking about people like the single mom from Burlington who has to choose between staying home with her sick kids or picking up another shift at the local subway to pay the rent. I'm talking about the fish harvester out east who isn't sure how they're going to afford their next season. I'm talking about the producer in Brandon, Manitoba, burdened by the carbon tax and worried about trade wars keeping their goods from market. I'm talking about the dad in Hinton, Alberta, who doesn't know what he's going to do when the bank's mortgage deferral program comes to an end. I'm talking about the family in Cantley, Quebec, who's trying to get their minivan to last through just one more winter, and they can't afford an electric car. And I'm talking about the people who drive a Ford 150, like thousands of Canadians, and they're tired of being insulted by Liberal elites. Here, here. And I'm talking about the family in Yukon who run a fly-in guide outfitting business, and they rely almost entirely on international tourism. These are the people, Mr. Speaker, that Conservatives are standing up for. These are the people that we know have been left behind in this Liberal speech from the throne. Now, let's just make sure that it's clear. The Prime Minister shut down Parliament. He prorogued Parliament. He shut down committees. He stopped everything dead in its tracks when he was being exposed for his scandal. Why? Because he said he was going to present a speech from the throne that would give Canadians a plan. It did none of that. It's clear, Mr. Speaker, the only reason he prorogued Parliament was to cover up and distract from his own scandal. So it's also very disturbing that there is no plan to deal with this pandemic. When our leader spoke with the Prime Minister last week, he asked the Prime Minister to ensure that Canadians had better and faster access to COVID testing options. This is vitally important right now, Mr. Speaker, that there are options for Canadians to get tested for COVID and to get the results back in a timely manner. It is unacceptable that we trust countries such as Japan, Germany, and the US with our national security intelligence, but we don't trust their approval of 15-minute saliva tests. Just last March, the Prime Minister promised that rapid testing for Canadians would be his top priority. Half a year and $500 billion later, and Canadian families are still waiting in line for hours, sometimes for days, for tests, let alone for those results. Because, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has failed to deliver. Maybe the wealthy, well-connected friends of the Liberal elite can afford to stay quarantined. Maybe they can afford to wait, but hardworking Canadians cannot afford to take weeks off to quarantine if they come up in a contact tracing list. They deserve a plan, and they deserve to have some hope. Mr. Speaker, there is no commitment to increase health transfers, which was the province's top ask. Instead of giving the provinces the resources they need to fight the pandemic, the Liberals are once again interfering in provincial jurisdiction. Last week, on behalf of the Premiers Kenney, Pallister, Ford, and Legault were here in Ottawa, presenting a united front, asking the federal government to do the right thing and provide appropriate healthcare funding to the provinces with no strings attached. Because contrary to what the Prime Minister thinks, who believes Ottawa knows best, it is the provinces who are best placed to deal with issues that fall within provincial jurisdiction. Last week, to highlight the extent of the healthcare funding problem, my Premier, the Premier of Manitoba, Premier Pallister, explained it this way. He said, "Never has there been a higher demand for healthcare. Never have federal contributions to healthcare been so low. And because of this, never have wait times been so long." And this was before the pandemic even started. Now, with the second wave of the pandemic upon us, people are hurting and sometimes even dying because the federal government isn't giving the provinces the healthcare funding they need to look after their people. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, the Canadian Medical Association had this to say about the failure of this Liberal Prime Minister's speech from the throne, and I quote, "Today's speech falls short of delivering on the promises of ensuring a resilient healthcare system and keeping Canadians healthy." The top issue we are dealing with today, Mr. Speaker, is a health crisis, and the Liberals have failed to address it in this speech from the throne. It is absolutely unacceptable. Now, while I could go on the issue of health care, I know that my colleague, the Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill, and our Shadow Minister for Health will have a lot more to say during this debate and during the days and weeks ahead. I want to close my remarks today with a very important issue. And I understand that possibly for some who are here in the East, it may not be something that's top of mind. For those who live in Ontario, Quebec, maybe Atlantic provinces, I fully understand, and I can see why they don't think of this as top of mind. And I wish the Prime Minister would help to bring it to the forefront, and that is the issue of unity. The issue of unity in this country and the issue of Western provinces, of which I come from one Western province, feeling alienated by this Prime Minister and by this government. The Prime Minister likes to say that we are stronger when we are united and we are all in this together. And yet our country is more divided than ever. Our Conservative leader made it clear during his first call with the Prime Minister that if the Prime Minister was serious, he must make addressing national unity concerns and Western alienation a priority. And yet, not a single thing in the throne speech to even acknowledge that there is a problem. Our government needs to show Canadians that it values and respects all of them and their contributions to this country. This respect starts with an understanding that various resource revenues in each of the regions of our country help to build our roads and our hospitals and our infrastructure in other parts of the country, not just in the provinces where the resources are found. The lack of respect by the Prime Minister for our natural resources industries is unacceptable, because the various natural resources industries form the backbone of our economy. In the words of Alberta Premier Jason Kenney, and I quote, he said, in a 6,783-word throne speech, not one word recognized the crisis facing Canada's largest industry, the energy sector, supporting 800,000 jobs. Instead, we got a litany of policies to strangle investment, jeopardize resource jobs, when we need an industry generating 20% of government revenues, unquote. Mr. Speaker, to highlight the failure of the Liberal government to deal with the issues facing Alberta, Premier Kenney went on to say, Alberta is disappointed that instead of listening to Canada's provinces, the federal government doubled down on policies that will kill jobs, make Canada poorer, and weaken national unity. In fact, agriculture, forestry, and energy resources, Mr. Speaker, were not mentioned once in this speech. This is completely unacceptable, given that we found out yesterday that Canada recorded its largest ever drop in natural resources unemployment in the second quarter. Mr. Speaker, under the leadership of our leader, the Honourable Member for Durham, Canadians can rest assured that we will hold the Prime Minister and the Liberal government to account. We will not support this speech from the throne, but we will put forward a plan that keeps Canadians safe, protects jobs, and gets our country back on track. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments. Questions, observations.
Questions and comments.
Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Madam Speaker. And as we on the government side recognize the importance of working with the provinces, territories, and other stakeholders to do what we can to minimize the negative impact of the second wave. Let me provide a quote from the Premier of Manitoba, a response to the Safe Restart Agreement, which contradicts most of what it is the leader or the deputy leader of the Conservative Party says. And let me give a quote right from the letter. This federal funding will help support work already undertaken by the Government of Manitoba to increase daily testing capacity from a baseline of 1,000 tests to more than 3,000 tests per day. It further goes on, Mr. Speaker, to state the Government of Canada will provide $700 million to support healthcare system capacity to respond to the potential future wave of COVID-19. A future $500 million will address immediate needs and gaps in support of protection of people experiencing challenges related to mental health, substance abuse, and homelessness. This investment will help keep Canadians safe and healthy with the health care support they needed. Does the member not agree that it's time that we get cooperation coming from the official opposition, as we are seeing even from Conservative premiers in Canada?
Member for Portage Lisgar.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, I think we have, as an opposition, shown ourselves to be very cooperative since the pandemic hit to pass emergency legislation. I mean, we had to be very careful because we saw this government try to take a power grab and do it during a pandemic. So we had to be careful, but we've been very cooperative. So I will take no lectures from my colleague from Manitoba on the Liberal side on cooperating. We have done our fair share of cooperating. Today is the day, and the opposition will take this day to stand up for Canadians who are left behind by these Liberals. Mr. Speaker, this is not just about throwing money at something. Money that, by the way, we've seen over the last 5 years, the Liberals are very good at promising and very bad on delivering. It actually never gets to its intended place. We've seen this when times were good, and the Liberals were promising money for our infrastructure. You can ask Manitoba, Mr. Speaker, how far that money went and was it delivered. And I can tell you it did not get to the intended place. So we're not impressed by the Liberal promises. We've heard it. We've seen that. We've got the T-shirt. Thank you.
She's got the T-shirt. Hopefully she gets the Safe Space Cafe T-shirt when they come out. Well, what do you think? Really, is this committees and all these meetings and stuff, the Liberals wash it, or is just press pause for a bit and it's coming back? Leave your comments below. Stay tuned for